Hey, what's up? I wanted to make a quick video talking about what runes do you actually take on this Diana champion, right? I get asked this a lot, right? And I wanted to not break down, what is the meta build? No one cares about the meta build, right? You're going to go onto OU.GG, Lawlytics, you're going to copy the highest win rate thing. Nothing matters, right? You're going to find, one person playing well for 3 games, right? But I want you to be able to break down when do I take each rune and why, because I think that that's really important. But before we get too far into it, find me on Twitch, Real Life Moon. Check it out. Link in the description. Thank you to Taco Timmer, my very lonely only subscriber right now, but I really do appreciate it. In any case, Electrocute. So, Electrocute, a lot of this is preference, right? Whether we go Electrocute, Phase Rush, Grasp, it's really preference in 90% of the matchups, right? But I want to break down, let's say you do go Electrocute, right? Electrocute's one of those runes where there is no specific reason why you would ever go Electrocute over another rune for a specific matchup, in my opinion. But if you were to go it, you'd probably go one of these things. I don't think I've really ever seen anyone have much success breaking too far away from this outline. But for Electrocute, sudden impact every time. Between Sixth Sense and Grizzly Mementos, doesn't really matter. It's preference. Treasure Hunter versus Relentless Hunter. If you have Teleport, you want to go Treasure Hunter. If you have Ignite, once again, preference. None of that matters. Where secondary, it's a bit interesting because you have preference, right? A lot of what Diana does a million things, so a lot of what it is actually a lot of preference from what I've seen. But what you have is you have Shield Bash plus Second Wind or Bone Plating, or you have Mana Flow Band Scorch, right? And when I will default personally to Shield Bash, because Shield Bash is really, really good. It kind of sucks that Diana uses Scorch and Shield Bash really well, and you have to choose between these two when you're playing with Electrocute. But what I will do is I will typically run Mana Flow plus Scorch if I'm in a matchup where I feel like I have a chance to get my mana out sustained, right? Maybe they're bulky, or maybe they have a lot of sustain. Something like Vlad or Kassadin are actually two matchups where I will go this over these. Right, I want to make the poke more potent. I want to have a bit of more mana, right? It really helps a lot. Where this, I'll take every other matchup. And the way that you choose between Second Wind and Bone Plating is you ask yourself, can they pop the Bone Plating easily, right? And if they can, does Bone Plating get value, right? Because something like if you're playing against Akshan, right? You're up against Akshan. He just auto attacks you and you lose your Bone Plating, right? Most range champions get auto attack and use your Bone Plating, but when they auto attack you, is it more of like a burst combo that they're doing, or is it something else? Like, Bone Plating is good into Ahri and LeBlanc, for example, because what does Ahri do? She's going to auto attack, W auto attack you, especially level 1, right? And Bone Plating is phenomenal into that, right? She's also, a lot of her damage is going to come from her charm into a bunch of follow-up damage at the same time. So Bone Plating gets a ton of value whenever it's up. And LeBlanc, she could always just auto attack you. But she's typically, she's going to auto attack you. She might W, she's going to look for a Q, right? She's looking for combos typically. And then naturally, into a lot of melee champions, you just want the Bone Plating, the Yasuo, Irelia, Akali, all these different champions, you want Bone Plating into them. And then, once again, every single rune, every single build, you're just going double damage plus flat health. Scaling health doesn't matter. We're an early game champion, and flat damage, just like, what are we trading, minion breakpoints on our Q to get a bit of attack speed when we're already one of the highest attack speed champions in the entire game? I don't think so. Get better at CSing, right? In any case, Phase Rush. Phase Rush is a ton simpler. You have Phase Rush every time, Mana Flow Band every time. Axiom Arcanist, I've been asked about it. I've never seen anyone use it to any level. Then you have Transcendence versus Absolute Focus. This is the first real question that you have in this tree, because this last question is kind of fake, and I'll explain why. But Transcendence versus Absolute Focus, you kind of start making preferences, right? You ask yourself, Transcendence typically, it's like, am I playing a build where I want to use my abilities more than once or less than once, right? And if you want multiple combos, if you want more ult uptime, you're going to go with this, right? You'll see a lot of people that build Proto Belt, for example, that they opt into a less damage heavy build. They're going to go Transcendence because they want to get off multiple abilities instead of, going for some potential one-shots, where Assassin builds will want to opt into Absolute Focus because you want to use one round of abilities. You want to make it quick. You want to make it flashy. And so that's what I ask myself. If I'm running a build, if I'm running if I'm running Proto Belt, I'm probably going this, right? Whereas if I'm going Lich Bane, I might be in the middle. I might not actually be sure. It really depends on what I want to build after Lich Bane. If I'm going Lich Bane Zhonya's, I might want CDR. If I'm going Lich Bane Shadow Flame, right, I might want to go Absolute Focus for the damage, right? And then if you're going Storm Surge, you're probably going Absolute Focus. In any case, though, Scorch versus Gathering Storm is interesting. I ask myself, what is the likelihood that I can do something with pressure in my lane, right? You ask yourself, does pressure matter? For example, I just played Phase Rush just yesterday against a enemy mid laner was a Lissandra, and she had an Udyr jungle. And anyone that has ever played Diana understands that you are in so much pain in the jungle 2v2. It's so hard. You can't do anything. If you walk up, or every single time you walk up, if you don't have like pristine vision, you're risking just dying to Udyr, right? Lissandra just presses W, Udyr runs out of the bush, and then you're burning a flash. And so I opted into this because my idea is that when I have perfect vision in a matchup where walking up is very difficult, then I'm probably not going to be able to pressure my laner very much, right? Like, maybe I'm hitting her with Qs every once in a while, but actually jumping on her, actually creating much more than just poke is going to be really hard. So I opt into Gathering Storm in those matchups. Where every other time, if I ever ask myself, is this lane solo killable? Can I get pressure, right? Or does my pressure matter? Then suddenly Scorch becomes a lot more important in these kinds of matchups. Which is, once again, something to consider. I would say that if you're going Phase Rush, 95% of the time you're going Scorch, right? But I think it's worth noting this because this is something that I've kind of come to a realization recently. I'm like, oh, big, But once again, between these two, same with Electrocute. Can this be hit off quickly, or am I gonna stop some kind of combo with it, or can I use it to get a heavy trade, right? If not, this. If I'm into Syndra, I'm just gonna be eating random autos. I'm gonna be eating airy procs. I'm gonna be eating Qs just over and over again. Same with Ori, right? Like, Bone Plate doesn't get much value. You're just eating way too much damage, and this just is gonna heal you so much from it. There are some caveats to this that I didn't want to put here because I don't actually have a ton of experience with them, but people do them. I don't necessarily agree with them, but you'll see people go like Legend Haste plus Cut Down. I've seen before. I've seen people go Jack of all trades plus the elixirs, right? The triple tonic. I've tried it, I've seen people go water walking. It feels like a symptom of a meta more than like an actual like decision that you make, if that makes sense, right? Like if you're below 100 LP masters, here you go. All this is kind of noise in my opinion. Okay, so Grasp. Grasp. People love Grasp. I actually find Grasp to be a lot of fun. I don't use it because I have a lot of impatience when I play Grasp, but I just really want to jump on people over and over again, and that's not healthy, so I'm not going to do that. But for Grasp, you really don't have too many options because it's super, super, super standard. You just take this, once again, same explanation for the third time, same with Phase Rush, same with Electrocute, you know. If you're going to get poked a lot, boom, Second Wind. If you're going to stop some kind of combo, if you're going to take heavy trades, boom, Bone Plating, right? But then here, this, I actually believe, completely preference. You're always taking Mana Flow Band every single time, right? That's not the question. It's between these two, Transcendence or Scorch. I personally really like Scorch. I think that the poke is really nice, but once again, same with the reasoning for Gathering Storm. If I am like, Scorch isn't really going to be doing much this lane phase, right? Because you really take Scorch for pressure in lane more than anything. If you're like, oh, this pressure isn't going to matter, or whatever it might be, whatever reason you might have for Scorch not being good, or maybe you're just a Scorch hater, whatever. I think Scorch is one of the best runes in the entire game, but just go Transcendence, super easy. Then I want to talk about Conquer, because Conquer, no matter how many times I'm like, okay, Conquer is bad. You don't want Conquer. Conquer sucks. People are like, oh, what about Conquer? And so it's like, okay, so you're going to ask me about Conquer anyways, so I'm going to talk about it anyways. Conquer ends up being really what you want, right? Conquer, I think, is dependent more on builds than any of the other ones. Because Conquer is the only rune that like doesn't win you lane. Every other rune is super incredible at winning lane, whereas Conquer is just kind of like this weird thing. And so what you want with Conquer is you want to ask yourself, right? Am I trying to be a tank? Am I just going, standard AP thingy, You're going to ask yourself, because that's going to change what you're going for here and between these, right? So let's break that down. Let's say I'm a tank, you're going to want Last Stand. Last Stand's going to be really good if you're a tank, because it's going to give you that extra bulk that you get as you're, sustain fighting. Whether you have Roa, whether you have Riftmaker, you have a bit of potential sustain that's going to keep you in it, and you're going to get low inevitably as Diana. And so having that extra bulk, being able to do more damage as you get lower really helps, right? Especially as you aren't going to be as explosive into one-shotting people. And as a tank, you're probably going to want Mana Flow to have a bit more mana. I think Presence of Mind is kind of really bad. It's like so conditional in my opinion on Diana, so I don't like it. I just go Triumph every time I take Conqueror. So you're going to want to opt into Mana Flow. And as your tank, probably going to want to go Transcendence, Mana Flow Transcendence. You're going to want to just get a bunch of abilities. You're really playing around your W on Diana as a tank. And so just having more Ws is really, really impactful. Whereas if you're AP, right, you're going to want to go differently, right? This looks a lot less appealing. Last Stand looks a lot less appealing. So Cut Down ends up being really, really good, because Diana, the damage, the way it works is that Cut Down just does more damage than Coup de Grace at the moment. And so if you're looking at 100-0 someone, doing that initial burst is going to end up being pretty impactful. And so we want to take this. We want to take Cut Down. And then all of this is fair game. Every single secondary here is fair game. If you really want to try to salvage some lane, especially if you're going Roa, right? If you're going Roa and you have a bunch of mana, then suddenly you don't need Mana Flow Band. And Blue Tree without Mana Flow Band, like I think that Absolute Focused Scorch has a lot of merit to it potentially. But then also that's like kind of more scaling. This gives you a little bit of lane pressure, but it's hard. Whereas this is going to give you a lot of lane pressure if you have this combination of some kind. Shield Bash is so good on Diana. It makes your shields better, does damage based on your shields, which you get 2 of them, so it procs twice, which is really, really crazy. So if you go this, because once again, it's kind of preference, you're going to want to get Second Wind or Bone Plating, depending on what you're actually doing. Once again, it's all about lane matchups. Am I going to get poked out? Am I going to eat a bunch of combos? Am I in melee range a lot? That's what's going to matter. And I think that with this, in the year of our Lord 2025, you're pretty set up to make all of your decisions about runes for the rest of your life. And I think that you should have a good one, and you should check out my stream later.